Dave, you bought an old truck that we had.
I didn't know if you'd remember that or not.
I do remember that. Did that thing hold up much at all?
So the story. So the story is,
I like that pause.
So when he had Sunrise, I had the little trio with my sister and another girl, and the dates were getting further and further, and we had a drummer and a bass player, and we were trying. And by the way, every service we ever did, which was a lot for a few years, we opened up with "We're Together Again."
Did you? Okay.
When God's people get together. I think you cut it in the key of A, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know.
Well, let's go with that then.
All right.
It makes me sound like I know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
So you had Sunrise, and we called it the bread truck, but it was like...
That's what we called it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
But you'd step in that thing, and it was like a customized bus.
It had a nice interior.
It was gorgeous.
You know Glenn Bates?
Oh,
Yeah.
Married to Becky Simmons.
Yeah.
That's how I know him.
I believe Glenn did a good part of that interior.
Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
I just saw Glenn was just out here the other day.
Yeah.
Who did he sing with?
Four guys.
Four guys. That's it. Yeah.
So when I don't know if you were going off the road or what, or moving to something bigger, but you put that up for sale. So on so many levels, that was a big deal for me to be able to get that, because I was this huge Gordon Jensen fan, and we needed something. And so we had it in the weekends. I'm not sure how it worked out, but the weekends when we weren't out, we were able to lease that thing to, there was a country singer named George Hamilton IV.
I remember Canadian guy.
Yep.
So
Another Canadian.
Canadian.
That's right.
That's where you're from, is that right?
Originally, yeah.
So that was a neat season. In Wayne Hilton,
Right.
one of the nicest guys I have ever met, ever.
Yeah.
And then growing up in Michigan, we would go to all the Lloyd Orrell,
Where in Michigan did you grow up?
Jackson.
Oh, yeah, an hour out of Detroit.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So there were so many connections, but your writing back in that day, it was just one song after another, and it was a different style than what Lanny was writing. It was a different style than what Dottie was writing.
But it still had that heart. I always think of him, Gaither, Dottie, Lanny, on that same vein. It was that heart. It was that great.
But everybody had a little group.
They did.
And I don't know. I'm going to ask more questions and I'm going to tell stories, I promise. But
I have a couple of stories too.
I don't know if you've ever heard this. And you might not know that all these years that's what I've done is I write. That was always the dream. That was the goal. Right. God's blessed it. And I had never heard anybody talk about writing. And I don't know what year it was. I should. But I was sitting in the nurses' auditorium at Murray State, Kentucky. And you came in and did a morning concert back for when Don Butler had the school. Do you remember that?
Way back.
Way back. I was very young.
Yeah.
And I was starting to write, and I could feel like, okay, I know I'm supposed to do this. You told the story, and if I'm not mistaken, the story you told, it was an abortion thing with a garbage can, and was it I Should Have Been Crucified? Was that the song, or what was the song that story would have set up?
I've got a song called Sometimes They Cry.
Sometimes They Cry. Okay.
Yeah, it's my pro-life song.
Yeah.
But you told that story, and I'm going to ask you to tell it again because I want to hear it again.
Okay.
But then you did a song that probably wasn't one of your more successful ones. But as
several of them.
as a young
All
writer,
writers do, huh?
the light went on, and it was a defining moment in my journey as a writer. And you quoted it, you may have even sung it, but you sang, you talked about you got to get there a different way. You can't say the same thing and say it the same way because those songs are already out there. You followed that up with just an empty glove lying on the table. It's my life without the master's hands, nothing good. And you got to that chorus, Lord, let me be the glove you wear today.
Yeah.
Use me, Lord. Am I quoting it right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And every light went on in this young kid's life. In my mind, that I just thought, I get it. A defining moment. And I could even take you to the seat where I was sitting at the nurse's auditorium that morning.
Man.
I love that.
So now I want to hear you tell the stories that I've been telling about you for years. Dusty, you said you met him when?
I just remember meeting you
In the Word days?
in the Word days, and I remember you came into the building, and of course it was Gordon Jensen and Dayspring. I had worked at a Christian bookstore, and I remember how I found his music. Of course, I always studied out the writers, and I'd look at all the records and read and I thought, oh, Gordon Jensen. And one of the first songs I sang was in church when I got saved was "Redemption Draweth Nigh." But I was a huge Dallas Home fan. And somebody came into the store one day. I can remember this as clear as day. I thought about this morning. And I was it was in Portland, Oregon at Christian Supply. And they said, we have every Dallas Home record. Have you heard anybody else that is kind of similar to this?
Wow.
And I remember Gordon. I remember I'd heard, and I can't remember which record it was, but it had come out on Dayspring. And I thought, and so I had played it for myself, and I thought, they'll love this. And this person, I remember, bought that. We had 2 or 3 things by Gordon Jensen. They took them all home, and they loved him. But that was my first memory of Gordon Jensen, besides Redemption Draweth Nigh. And then, of course, I started seeing the songs and everything. But I was such a Gordon Jensen fan because those songs to me were such. I hate when we call music Southern gospel or contemporary music. I call it heart music. And that's what it is to me, because it's music that touched. I got saved when I was 14, and they introduced me to the Ramblers music. I didn't know it was Southern gospel. I didn't know Lanny Wolf Trio was inspired. I just knew it was great heart music.
Yeah, loved it.
And so I've always appreciated his songs because it's true heart songs.
Okay, so you're from Canada originally.
Yes.
And you wrote Redemption Draweth Nigh when you were how old?
I was 18.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. You kind of put all of us to shame.
Yeah.
18.
And that song is
1969.
Take us from how you got from Canada to Redemption Draweth Nigh. How does that begin?
Well, I'm from Windsor, Ontario. And that's suburban Detroit.
Right.
And a little bit of trivia. Windsor, Ontario is south of Detroit, Michigan.
Huh.
And I mentioned that in programs because people kind of scratch their head. That's the only part of Canada that's south of the U.S. border.
That's so funny.
But anyway, that's where I lived my first 8 years. Then my family moved to Arizona, to the U.S. and remained in the U.S. Eventually, my parents retired and went back to Canada and passed there. But I was 8. They moved to Mesa, Arizona. That's where I met mountains, which I've got a song that I couldn't have written had it not been for that.
What song?
Bigger Than Any Mountain.
Of course.
That you can and cannot move.
Yeah.
We were in Mesa, Arizona about a month ago.
Is that right?
Yeah, back in March. Went out to the Superstition Mountain.
Oh, yeah. I remember going on camping trips in the Superstitions. We all had read about the Lost Dutchman's gold mine, and we all wanted to find it. Went on several hikes.
So we were there, and we went looking for. We were there in March. We went to hear Emily Ann.
Yep.
And it was our anniversary, and so we drove out there just to see some cactus and some wood. So we get to the Superstition Mountain, and somebody says later, that I said, "What's the story about the Lost Dutchman?" And they tell us a story that twice a year that shadow shows up on that mountain. We were there on that day and left before the shadow hit because we didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
But
but I have a vivid memory of being on a hike. We were looking for that thing, and lost my footing and ended up with my rear end in cholla cactus. That was a blessing. I want to tell you.
I bet. How old were you?
Oh, I was probably 12, 13 years old when that happened.
Okay, so is that your time in Arizona? Does that have any play in why you eventually called your group Songwriters?
Not necessarily.
You just like the name of it.
Yeah, we just went with that. But I was in Arizona until I was not quite 15, and then they moved back to Detroit, and started attending a large church in Detroit, and that's where I met Larry Orrell at that church.
Were you musically, when you were younger, did you learn to play the piano and everything back then?
I started taking lessons
Did
when
you?
I was 8 years old.
Were your parents or family musical?
My mother played a little,
Okay.
but the rest of the family was not particularly.
So
Musical.
when you wrote Redemption,
Yeah,
Before you go there, do you remember what your first song was?
I do, but
but most writers won't share it.
I don't share that.
Donnie
go.
Rambo would never share her for first one either.
I will never share mine either.
I
So
just
just
love
for
that.
what it's
So
worth.
how old were you?
The first song,
Yeah.
I might have been 11, 12 years
That's
old.
awesome.
That's
Yeah.
That's
about
so
right.
great. That's what I love that.
Yeah, yes, sir.
So get me to Redemption, because this is the one you've probably
Yeah.
told 1,000 times, but I've never heard the story behind the story.
Well, okay, from Detroit, well, I met Larry Orrell,
Right.
wanting to organize a group.
Yeah.
And so we experimented with 2 or 3 tenors, and then we met Wayne Hilton. And Wayne was the guy. Wayne's got a beautiful voice. He's really a strong
Right.
Yeah.
singer. But anyhow, I wrote Redemption Draweth Nigh, and Larry came down to Quartet Convention, and his father was a friend of Pat Zondervan.
Yeah.
Okay.
And sight unseen, Zondervan gave Larry a record deal for his
Wow.
group,
Wow.
and which was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I had
Still
one,
is.
I had one song on our first album with Zondervan. It was a sing chord label,
Yep.
which was managed at one time by Jake Hess
Yeah,
for
yeah,
2 or 3
yeah.
years, and that was amazing to me. But so we were cutting an album. I had 4 songs on the second one, 4 songs on the third one. And then the next album, Dwayne Allen had said, "Gordon, if you got any new songs, I'd be interested in hearing them." And of course, he had Silver Line, Gold Line.
Yeah.
And so he came to our recording session, and we recorded in the old RCA Victor B studio
Right.
down here. And that was remarkable to me also, when you consider
Every passing climb.
the stuff that was recorded in that place.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. Anyhow, but Dwayne came to the session when we cut Redemption Draweth Nigh, and he said, I want to publish that song. And we also, in that same recording, did a song called The Coming of the Lord Could Be Today. And he said, I want that song. And he said, the Oak Ridge Boys will cut The Coming of the Lord Could Be Today. And he said, it will take off and do well, and then it'll settle down. But he said, Redemption Draweth Nigh, we're not going to cut it first. He said, I've got several people in mind for that song. And he said, that thing is going to rise slowly,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
it's going to reach a certain level, and it's going to stay there a long time. And he's always had a knack for
Oh
songs.
yeah. Oh yeah.
And he was exactly right on. Now, he wanted me to sign a long-term
Long-term.
contract
Of course
with them.
he did.
But see, that's about the time I met Bob McKenzie and Bob Benson and
Yeah,
John T.
sure.
III. And they offered us a deal we couldn't refuse.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I signed on to the Benson Company, and they recorded Orrell's albums.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
How did Dwayne take that?
he wasn't happy. He
Okay.
was not happy. And I don't blame him.
Yeah.
No. He knew what he was doing.
So who actually had the first cut? Because we were talking about this
On
earlier
Redemption
today.
Draweth
Yeah.
Nigh? I can't tell you who it was, but I can tell you the people that put that song on the map are the Sammy Hall Singers.
Yep.
You remember that?
Wow.
Sue Duffield
Yes.
and
Uh,
Yeah.
the Sammy Hall
Oh,
Singers.
Sam,
And then
yeah.
The Downings.
Yep, that's where
Downings really punched
That's
the
where I
daylights
remember
out of
hearing
that
it
song.
from the Downings.
The Galileans.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And you remember them?
Yep,
The-
Jackie Velasquez's dad was one of them.
The Galileans, that's right.
Jackie Velasquez was
Yeah,
a
that's right.
popular artist. That was her dad, David Velasquez. That was
Yeah.
his group, which they later became the Latinos
Yeah.
and were a word artist. Oh,
That's
I'm just a wealth of
I did a.
unusable dollars.
I don't normally show up to these things with any notes because I'm so intrigued by the stories. We just
Just
keep
let it
asking
roll.
questions. But I looked up today just the people who had recorded a list of people who had recorded Redemption
I
Draweth
love
Nigh.
this.
It was
Yeah,
staggering.
yeah.
Well, I remember one time, and it's when Noel Fox was running Silverline,
Yeah.
and he said I counted 300 licenses
Wow.
on that song. This was
Wow.
a long,
Yeah.
decades ago.
I guarantee you.
Yeah,
And of course, it was in the movie Left Behind.
yeah, and it gets recorded
all the time.
several times every year.
A group called the Hayes Family, which is a marvelous family.
Is that
group.
Mylan?
Mylan Hayes. Yes, it's his family group. They just recorded it. It's on their record.
I have a song that they put on the map called "I'd Never Miss Heaven
It's
for
a
the
great
World."
song.
Yeah.
I did not know. Oh,
Yeah.
they recorded.
a great job on
They
that.
did Redemption Draweth Nigh.
So one of the things that I hate about the changing times is back in that era, you could cut a song
Oh,
and everybody wanted they go cut it again.
Oh, yeah.
And nowadays you cut it once, you go, okay, well that
And
was
I
the
hate
lifespan
that.
of that
I-
song.
Well, but you know that bugged the daylights out of me, as you could imagine. We're a songwriter,
Oh yeah.
but guys would say, "Well, we don't want to do something other people have done." Well, you don't know. It might be the third cover that becomes the hit.
Well,
You just
I
never
always
know.
go back to Dottie Rambo's Shelter
Yeah.
in the Arms of God.
Yeah.
Downings, Rambo's, and Oak Ridge Boys, all within a year.
Yeah.
And all
And the-
three of them were on the chart. At
And the
different
new
times.
High Road single
Oh,
is When I Lifted
When
My
I Lift
Head.
Yeah.
But I remember I was with the Spears for 5 years, and I remember that at one point, Standing on the Solid Rock
Yeah.
was number 1 by the Inspiration, number 2 by the Kingsmen, I
Yeah.
think 5 by the Spear
Yep,
family.
yep.
There you go.
Yep.
It was basically the same arrangement,
Yeah.
but it was a good song.
A good song. Is a
I
good
had
song.
I remember those days. We would work, all these all night singings that went on forever.
Yeah.
And so like who was the guy at the pleasing food stores? J.G. Whitfield.
Oh yeah. Oh
Okay.
yeah. Oh.
He had so many promotions that he
Yep.
was subsidizing
Yep.
with that grocery
Yep.
store
Yep.
business.
Yep.
And some really bad programming.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you got 15 groups on the program or whatever. And I went to some programs where Redemption Draweth Nigh was done 7, 8, 9
Yeah.
times
Isn't that
in the same program.
And you're 18.
Yeah.
So you had to have either some pretty good business instincts or you trusted the circle that you were in.
It was just the grace of God. It really
Yeah.
was. I trusted this.
But then you start following that up with, Jesus will outshine. I mean, it was just one after another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were, last year I was back at Murray and Michael Booth just sat down and he just broke into, I think it was closest mention of his name. It was the same moment I felt when I heard that song years ago. And then just this week, I got a call from one of the top session singers in town. He said, "You don't know how I could possibly find an old song called Desert of My Days." I
Oh,
said,
man.
absolutely, I do. Larnell Harris had the big cut on it.
Oh, yeah. You can go to YouTube and
I know.
Larnell's
Yep.
on there with that
Yep,
song.
sure is.
That was just the most dynamite
Yeah, it's a great song.
combination of
Yeah.
material and singer.
Yeah, yeah.
He sang the daylights out of that.
He is. The next interview that we do is with Larnell.
Oh.
So I can't wait to ask him.
That's going to be great.
Yeah, it will.
Yeah.
He's the real deal as well.
Yes, he is.
So, what was your inspiration behind writing that song? Back then, of course, too, everybody talked about Jesus coming. It seems like a lot more than nowadays.
Right.
Back then they did. Did you have any inspiration for
On,
it? Did
on
you
Desert of My Days?
No, I'm sorry.
Redemption Draweth Nigh.
Redemption Draweth Nigh.
Oh,
Sure.
yeah. Everything was about the second
Yeah,
coming of
yeah.
Christ. Hal Lindsey had that
Yeah,
book.
The Late Great
The Late
Planet
Great
Earth.
Planet Earth. there was a huge groundswell
It
of
was probably about the time of David Wilkerson,
Yeah.
Crossing the Switchblade,
All that
and
stuff.
all the other movies that were the big movie that was back then.
What's mind-boggling to me is if you go back and read that lyric
Oh,
in light of where we are today in
Today.
the news cycle, you'd go, that could have been written yesterday.
yeah.
Well, the thing about the song is that it doesn't really support any particular eschatological
Right.
viewpoint. You know,
No.
some people don't believe in the rapture.
Yeah.
Some
Yeah.
people don't
Yeah.
believe in this
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
about it. You know, the coming Lord. But it embraces all of
I
it
totally agree.
and brings it all together.
Yeah.
And
So was that intentional at 18?
it wasn't intentional.
Okay.
But that was just.
I'm still impressed, but I was going
Me
to be
too.
really impressed.
No, I didn't know what I was doing.
That's what I was going to ask. Did you
I-
feel like you knew it was going to be?
I wrote that song in a very short time.
Yeah.
And you probably know this as well, that sometimes the songs that you write fast
Yeah.
and are satisfied with it in a short
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
those are the ones that generally rise.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's not a first song. How many had you written at that point?
20 songs,
Okay.
something like that. But yeah, Redemption Draweth Nigh. Doug Oldham had a huge
Yes, he did.
version of
Yeah.
that.
But there
as
were
well.
people like Clement Derricks
Oh yeah, I remember him.
that cut that song.
Yeah.
Who wrote? Well, he
Did he do
have a little talk.
just? Is that him?
I think so.
Just a little talk with Jesus.
Okay. I didn't know that.
But names like that were not in the quartet circuit.
Right.
But a song like that, the songs that you and what Lanny wrote and what Dottie was writing back then, they were right in the middle of where the church
They
was.
sure were. They
Yeah.
sure were.
And if I remember right, now you didn't do a lot of co-writing. You wrote, if I remember right, you wrote "God Still Loves the World" with Billy Blackwood. Is that right?
Yeah.
Now there's a name. This may be way out of left field. You know the name Don Cook.
Oh yeah.
So Don and I wrote. for
Didn't
years
Don
and years.
just pass not long ago?
Or January 15th. Yes.
I thought I had seen that.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
And Don,
I'm sorry to hear it.
yes, it was a tough one personally and for our industry.
Yeah.
But Don used to share, before he got married, and he and Leslie had been married a lot of years, he lived in a little house with a guy named Ace Swain.
Oh yeah, Ace Swain. Ace was an interesting guy. I believe Ace is still with us down in Metairie, Louisiana, and that's where he's from. But his name is Asa, A-S-A, just like the king in the Bible.
Okay, I thought it was just AC.
No, that's where Ace came from.
Oh, okay.
You know, people called him that all
Yeah,
the time.
yeah.
It just stuck with him. But he was with a group called Bridge. You remember Jim Van
Jim
Hook?
Van Hook.
And
I didn't know
Bridge?
Ace was with Bridge.
Yes, he was.
That
I
was
didn't
John
know that.
Barker was in that group.
And
I love that.
Mike Corey,
Barry
Landis.
Landis.
Yep, that's what I remember. Yep. I saw one of the few first Christian groups I saw in Twin Falls, Idaho. At First Assembly
I still
God
got
Church.
a sealed
Bridge
in
building.
cellophane LP of Bridge where they had
Yep.
John Barker sitting
Yep.
at the drum
That's
kit that
so
says
funny.
Bridge on the kick drum.
Yeah.
That's
I had
so
no idea
Yeah.
that connection with Ace.
Yeah. Ace was with that bunch and that group.
Yeah.
And anyway, he was coming off the road and needed a job, needed work. And so he kind of took over booking for me for a while.
That's what I was thinking.
And did a pretty decent job. I booked maybe a third of the dates, and he did the rest of them. But he had a good run there for 2-3 years booking.
But he co-wrote a couple of your songs, like
yes,
Tuesdays and
yes,
Thursdays.
he did.
Right?
Yes, he did. And a couple others. I'd have to sit down and look.
But didn't Billy co-write "God Still Loves the World"?
Yes, right. But Ace did Tuesdays and Thursdays, and anyway, Ace Schweim.
That's
S-
funny to
W-
even remember that name. but-
SWAIM.
So Don, I met before he, married Leslie, and we were starting to write and getting cuts were happening, and he's telling me about this guy he lived with,
Yeah.
and I just thought that was the oddest thing because Don's asking me, you know this guy named Gordon Jensen? 'Cause he was hearing about you from Ace, and I'm like,
Oh,
This industry's so small.
yeah.
well, I'll tell you what, Ace and I, we worked the road hard. I mean, we had a lot of all-night drives, a lot of them.
So
Went
after
to Texas 3 times in 1 month one year.
after Larry Orell and that,
Uh-huh.
is that when you started Sunrise?
No,
Did
the
you
deal. The deal with Sunrise was the Benson Company wanted us to come back together,
Yeah.
and we had hung it up. And like a year and a half later, we did the album together again.
Right.
That's where that
Right.
song came
Yeah.
from.
Hmm.
And so we started talking about, how can we improve this group? And so we said, well, we need some side guys. We need some additional musicians. And Steve Spear came on board to play
Right,
bass.
right.
And we'd have him sing a song on every program. And it always went over good.
What song did he do? The Man I'm Looking For?
Yeah, The Man I'm Looking For. That was his song.
David is this wealth of knowledge.
Yeah.
It just blows
Well,
my mind.
No, but Steve used to do
loved
that
that
with the
song.
Spears, yes.
Yeah.
And that was horrible theology in that song.
I never analyzed it
It's probably
at
best.
all. It's best not to analyze it.
That's right.
If you
Yeah.
see a man in sandals, coming, that's the man I'm looking for. I'm like, okay. But it had the cool melody, and it was one that was
Back
almost
then.
written for his voice.
Yeah, it was. And he put it over real well.
Billy was in that group, right?
Billy was in that group. He was another one.
Wow.
And then Wayne Hilton was managing Superior Sound for Dwayne
Yep,
Allen.
Yep.
And doing all kinds of custom work. And he would get guys to come with us on trips. We weren't working that much. We were doing maybe 60 weekends a year. No.
That's a lot of weekends in one
That's
year.
more than he.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It just felt like that.
Let me think about that again.
60 dates a year?
Maybe 60 days a year. There we go.
That felt like 60
Yeah,
weekends.
that's true.
Which most of those were initiated because of the PTL club in Charlotte.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
We were going over and they'd book us for a couple days at a time.
Yeah.
And then we'd set up church dates
Right.
around
Yeah.
it to
Yeah.
make that trip fattened up.
Yeah.
And Wayne would bring people along. I remember Marty Stewart went with us.
Wow.
Yeah. And we'd have him sing,
Yeah,
and
So let me ask you a question.
yeah.
Do I remember this correctly? That you had a producer from Toto,
Yes, that's true.
David Hungate,
David Hungate, yeah.
produced.
Okay.
Now, that was way off the grid for Southern Gospel. How did that happen?
Well, we're kicking ideas around saying, well, we need something that really pulls us out of that stereotype,
Yeah.
gives us something a little more contemporary, and, we'll see what promoters, radio people can do with it, And so somebody came up with the idea of David Hungate and arranged a meeting, and that's how that happened.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and Hungate, boy, he was a tremendous bass player.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
One of the best in the world,
Yes.
really. Yeah, he was something.
That's crazy. And I don't know why I remember that, except that just seemed like... And Neil Joseph was pretty influential during that season.
Well, Neil did 2 albums while I was still with Benson,
Yeah.
Right.
and then he went to work
Yeah.
and pulled me along.
And he had that contemporary flair too.
He did.
He was very instrumental in those early contemporary.
And he worked a lot with Barry Landis.
did?
I mean, that
Oh,
was
yeah.
a small
Yeah.
circle.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody was...
Oh, yeah.
It was. But Hungate, interesting guy, because his wife was raised in the Baha'i faith.
Right.
And his, let me think, I don't know if he's his brother-in-law or just a close friend, but the guy, Summer Breeze,
Yeah.
who was it that did
Christopher
it?
Cross?
No, it was Seals and Croft.
Yes.
Oh,
Seals and Croft. They're Baha'i faith.
Oh wow.
And they were all in a tight connection.
Yeah.
And
And that's how...
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, it is.
But Neil and his wife used to go to a Nazarene church.
Yeah,
Grace Church of Nazarene.
yeah,
I didn't know
they
that.
did. Yeah.
Wow.
Her name was Wendy.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to ask. Yeah.
I don't even know where Neil is now. I have
He's
no
in
idea.
Dallas.
Is he in Dallas?
Last I heard.
Okay.
And I want to say he works. Well, he works for like a child sponsorship something, but I don't remember what it is. It's not Compassion, but it's
Something like that.
Yeah.
That's a good
Yeah.
fit.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
what he does.
She had that gregarious personality.
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I don't
that
remember
would
what all he did, but I was a huge Neil. I always think of him when I think of Brooklyn Tab, when I think of those
Oh, yeah.
early
'Cause he got in there with Brooklyn
he did
Tab.
in the early days.
Yeah.
He was a real huge.
I met
advocate.
the Symbols in 1979 at an AG
Yeah.
General Council,
Wow.
and that's how I got booked in Brooklyn Tab
Yeah.
the first time, and then I connected Neil
With
with the
the-
Symbols.
Yeah, because he was very.
And he got on the stick with Carol Symbol and her stuff. Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I should know this. Have you written a book? Or is this all documented somewhere?
I've never written a book, no.
Wow.
I have written a manuscript for a book. I've got like 22 or 3 chapters, but they're about, it's called The Unmistakable Voice of God. It's not about it's about things I have witnessed and experienced in ministry that half the evangelical world don't even believe can happen.
Yeah.
And that's their problem.
Yeah.
Don't I remember though that your greatest hits, Volume 1, wasn't it called something like Songs God Gave? I mean,
Yeah, Volume 1. I have yet to do Volume 2.
that was my next question. Yes.
Yeah, I have not yet done Volume 2.
Songs like Written in Red, and I mean, you go down the list of
Gosh, those lyrics.
that people that wouldn't be able to put a face with the songs can sing you songs like I'm a whale of a lot wiser than I used to be back in my Jonah days.
Yeah. Back in that was my Jimmy Buffett gospel
Yeah,
song.
it
It's a
very
great
much
one.
is.
I hadn't thought of that. That's a great way to describe it.
Great
Yeah.
way to describe it.
Yeah. Caribbean country.
Yeah.
Did you feel like pressure after having so many hits so early? Did you ever feel a pressure of I've got to keep on delivering?
Yes and no. Because I couldn't just start cranking out anything, you know.
Were you the type of the writer, if they'd tell you, I need you to write something about the blood, could you do that, or did you have to be really inspired by that?
I had to be inspired.
Yeah,
I have to have an idea that burns, that excites
I love
me.
it.
Well, because if you can't get excited about it,
Yeah.
where are you going to get the juice to do it? You know?
Okay, so as soon as you said sometimes I cry, I went, yes, that was the story that you told. Do you mind sharing that again?
I'd be glad to. The interesting thing about that song is after I wrote it, I couldn't interest anybody in gospel music to do it.
Sure.
I pitched it around and
Because
it was too gruesome for me.
yes, that's what I started saying.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
but
But the story is what
yeah,
caught a young kid in Murray, Kentucky.
I was up in somewhere around Akron, Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio, up that, you know, the old Humbard territory.
Yeah.
And did a Sunday morning, and a lady came to me at the end of the meeting and introduced herself. She was a nurse, and she told me her story about being involved in an abortion. Okay, and I don't think she really understood at the time just how awful it was. But what happened was they called it the. Let me see if I remember the term they used. The something tragedy. They have a term for it. Anyway, this baby was born alive. That is the bottom line. It survived the saline, all that garbage they do, you know, to trigger the abortion. And this baby was born alive, and began to cry. And this nurse said, I couldn't, her maternal instincts took over. And she started to care for that baby, and the doctor said, get away from that fetus and let it die. Well, she just kept taking care of the baby. And the doctor told her 2 or 3 times exactly what I just said, and get away from it and let it die. And she wouldn't do it. I mean, she was threatened with the loss of her job and the whole thing, you know. But anyway, that baby survived what should have killed it in the abortion process. And so that's where the line comes from. Sometimes they cry, and but not for long. Don't you wonder where have all the children gone? Sometimes they cry, but not for long. Lord, it's wrong. It's so wrong. That's the chorus of the song. Yeah. And it tells the story in the verses, you know. And there's a bridge in it.
I remember that now.
Yeah.
But that was I'd never really heard anybody talk about saying the different songs, you know, saying a different way. And you ended up, there were records along the way where you cut songs like, do I remember a title like Major Danger or something?
Yeah, that was on the Hungate production.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it was like, that seemed like a departure from the normal lyric that you were writing at that point.
Yeah.
But the things that you said, you never wrote over anybody's head. And the reason those songs still live today, it's just amazing how well they were crafted.
Major Danger, and you know what? Ace Swain might have been involved in that song. I'd have to go back and research it, look at it. But David Hungate, before we ever got into the project seriously, he handed me a whole bunch of Gordon Lightfoot recordings, said, you need to listen to these things over and over and over.
Wow.
And because Lightfoot was, you know, a genius songwriter.
Amazing.
Genius songwriter. And my young son, he was young, Mike was a big fan of Lightfoot, and Lightfoot came to Ryman 2 or 3 times a week. Go down.
He was from Canada as well, right?
Oh yeah, Toronto, Orillia, Ontario, Orillia, and but he, I can remember where I was when I was still in high school. Walked into a little hamburger joint, and the song on the jukebox was "If You Could Read My Mind." That is
what it's my thoughts for today.
Oh, that is a gem.
It is a gem.
It is an incredibly great song.
And we all thought that was rock music back then.
Oh no! It had a little drive to it.
It was so good. I love it. It's those songs. It's like James Taylor, Carole King.
All those guys.
Those singer songwriters. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I need to go back now and listen to those two together.
Yeah.
Which one?
Major Danger. Just the
I
influence.
need to do the same thing.
So last night we sat downtown Nashville at a concert by Jimmy Webb.
Really?
And it was billed as stories and songs.
And Webb did the concert? How old is he now?
77.
I would have thought he was older.
Me
than that.
too.
He'd go for the high note, and he spent most of the concert with his head back,
his head up, trying to
hit notes. And
see if I can put my head up high enough, I can get the note up there.
And then sometimes he'd say, "All right, folks, I need some help. I can't get this note." And the whole crowd
would they sing along?
Oh yeah.
Well, it was so interesting you said that because I saw a ton of people posting. I started playing on Saturday morning. For some reason, I just was driving and I thought, I'm going to listen to Glenn Campbell. And I had no idea Jimmy Webb was here.
That was one of the greatest pairings that ever happened in the music business.
Wichita Lineman.
Oh yeah.
But I didn't
MacArthur's Park.
Yes.
I didn't realize till last night that how small a part Glenn was in his story. Because yes, that's what I always
thought. I always thought it was huge. Yeah.
But he started telling stories about
Galveston.
Oh
yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah. And he told the story of, he said the first time he played Galveston for Glenn, he said, I sat and played it real slow. Galveston. Oh, yeah. He said, Glenn said, nobody's going to sing that slow. And said when Glenn cut it was Galveston. Oh yeah. Well, I love the stories.
Oh, yeah, me too. Yeah.
So my question was, at some point during the concert last night, he said, let me tell you, he talked real slow, but everybody was on the edge of their seat. And he said, let me tell you what I think makes a great song. And you know, he brought out some things that you go, Yes, 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 yes. And it makes me want to go to somebody like you who influenced somebody like me, who I would like to think I've influenced some younger writers come along somewhere else. You don't know.
Yeah.
But I know that you influenced me.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear what's your take when you hear a song. Do you still have pretty strong opinions about when you hear stuff on the radio that you go, that's a great song, or that's not, and I can tell you why.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I need to walk real softly with that.
No, you don't.
No, that's
Especially with a microphone on it.
And a camera too. So
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, without naming names, because I've been burned on that road before. But so what are some? Do you find some ingredients that you say, here's why I like a certain song because the writer did this? Are there just general things that you look for?
Well, there are just certain writers that I'm going to pay attention to because just about everything they do is pretty good. I loved Tom T. Hall's stuff.
Oh yeah.
The storyteller.
Oh, that's
To me, one of the greatest songs in country music is "Old Dogs and Children
of Watermelon Wine."
That's a great song.
And the
I have not
old
thought
guy.
about that song.
Have you heard it?
Yes, I haven't thought about it in years.
I
Though.
love that song.
But he had Clayton Delaney, and
Yeah, I remember the day Clayton Delaney died.
I went out.
And I worked a little date at a church in Franklin 5, 6, 7 years ago, and this lady was standing out in front of the CD table, and she said, and she had one of my CDs. She said, "I recorded this song." I said, "You did? Which song?" And she said, "Bigger Than Any Mountain." Wow. And I had to stand there for a minute and look. It was Jeannie C. Riley.
Oh my goodness!
who it was.
Harper Valley.
Harper Valley PTA.
Speaking of Tom T. Hall.
Yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
That was a career
that is
song. I saw a
Yeah.
one-song career.
Yeah.
So Tom T had a studio at his house. Do you know this?
No.
Do you know this?
No.
And he would let anybody. This was right up 5 years before he was gone.
Okay.
Anybody could record there for free, as long as they did at least one of his copyrights.
Really?
Well, that was a smart
That
idea.
is very smart.
Absolutely.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
So another great Tom T story. You know Jerry Salley. You know that name?
I don't.
Jerry runs like a Billy Blue
Billy
Records.
Blue Records
of
here
us.
with us at Daywind. Yeah.
But
yeah.
he's written a ton of gospel songs. He's a guy you would love to sit down and
You
have
would
breakfast
love
with.
Jerry Salley?
Jerry Salley.
Yeah.
You'd love it. He would love.
How do you spell his last name?
Salley.
Okay,
And just
Sally.
Yeah.
he's been in town 40 years. He's written a ton of stuff.
Okay.
One of his biggest songs was Stephen Curtis Chapman's "His Strength Is Perfect."
Yes.
It's a great song.
But a lot of country.
Yeah.
He's got the new
Blues.
Jason Aldean single
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah.
You know, he's
Yeah.
that guy
Yeah.
that just.
Well,
Strong Christian. Strong,
Yeah.
I mean, great
So-
man. Yeah.
He was friends with Tom T.
I didn't know that.
And if you go in Jerry's house, Tom T was like he would do drawings. And Jerry's got two of them hanging up on his wall. And they're not in frames.
oh,
So I asked him the story behind it, and he said that Tom T gave him those drawings or prints, whatever you call them, with one condition, that
Don't
he
frame
never
them?
put a frame on them. Because he says once you put a frame around a picture, it becomes art.
Oh my goodness!
Now
That's
think
so
about that.
Funny. Wow.
or
He didn't want his stuff to be
Yeah.
considered.
Art.
It was the same way he wrote songs.
Yeah. Wow.
Just
that's
tell me the
that's
story.
interesting. Very interesting.
I love those kind of little
Yeah.
Yes.
tidbits
yeah.
that you don't read in the news.
Wow.
So when you, we could sit here for 3 hours and say, okay, now tell me the story behind Whisper Jesus, but Written in Red is another one that's just an all-time classic. And Janet
Pascal
had the definitive cut of that, but did she have the first cut?
No, the first cut was Henry and Hazel Slaughter.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
Janet came along a while later with
But
her
her
version
rendition of it is incredible.
That's right. Oh,
One
yeah,
of the best renditions.
In fact, I got a phone call from a guy ran a radio station. Well, you would know him out of Tulsa, Broken Arrow,
yeah,
Oklahoma.
yeah.
What was the guy's name? He was a songwriter.
Okay.
David Ingalls.
Oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Had a church right there.
Oasis of Love.
Broken Arrow.
His big song
Oklahoma.
was Oasis Love. I
But
found the
Didn't he write
Oasis-
some Andrews Blackwood stuff?
Yeah,
He probably did, but his son whose name was David Warren Ingalls.
Okay.
He went by David Warren.
Okay.
So that kind of threw people off.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But he called me out of a clear blue sky one day and said, Gordon, have you heard Janet Paschal's version of Written in Red? I said, no. I didn't know she had cut it. I did not know she had cut it.
She owned it.
Well, yeah, he said it is a fabulous cut, and he said we are getting so many requests for the thing, and he said if you'll sit there, I'll play it for you over the phone, and he did.
Wow.
Played it to me over the phone,
Yeah.
and there's a world of choral music out
Yeah.
there,
Oh,
and
yeah.
hot arrangers.
Yep.
But one of the hottest choral arrangers was Camp Kirkland.
Right.
Yep.
And he took Janet's version of it and choralized it. And then it took off.
And that was a word anthem, if I'm
It
not
was.
mistaken.
Oh, yeah, it was.
Yep.
It-
I forgot about that.
You
didn't.
When the choirs started, I think
yeah,
every Southern
yeah.
Baptist
Oh,
church
yeah.
in America, the
And Camp
choir
is a
did
dear
it.
friend, and
Yeah.
he's got great song instincts as well.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just the way Janet dressed that song. It makes
Yeah.
you want to go listen to all these songs. Again.
Janet, I actually sang in the family's church in North Carolina several years ago.
Okay.
And
was she there?
Yes, she was. And
How sweet.
that was.
That's-
But she told me the story. As a teenager, she made her living bundling tobacco or
Yeah.
whatever it was she did.
Yeah.
But it was basic stuff in the
Yeah.
tobacco industry.
I just talked to her the other day. She started going back out. She hadn't been singing the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But she started going back out.
Oh,
And
good.
so she just ordered a bunch of her greatest hits because Word has them. And so I thought that was so cool. I was
That's
glad to
great.
see that she was going back
I
out.
probably shouldn't tell this story, but my favorite Janet story is
Yeah.
one weekend, and I'm still not sure why, but I went out for the weekend with her and Joel Lindsay was
Yeah.
playing piano for
Yeah,
her.
I forgot that he did that.
And they were in Detroit. And that may have been why I went, because they were really close to home. So I said, would you be interested in going to a ball game? And I knew somebody who got us seats at the old Tiger Stadium.
Okay.
And that night was Bud Light cooler giveaway night.
Oh.
They handed out these little, as you walk in the door. Well, Janet had never been there to a game, obviously.
Right.
And here's this sweet, innocent Janet Paschal. And I look over, she's holding this because she didn't want to throw it away. I don't know what, but it was one of the funniest pictures. And she'll shoot me for telling that story.
The Bud Light thing.
Yeah.
That's
Just
funny.
Janet
Well, you
Paschal.
combine that with the tobacco
That's
business.
it.
Yes.
She's her career is
She's living on the
we just blew her poor career. I love Jen.
So
I love
when
Jen.
somebody like that takes and that was not only a right song for her to sing, but that helped bring that song back
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
center of the
Yeah.
church.
Yeah.
Sure did.
So does an artist like that, do they call you when they're recording again to say, okay, what else have you got?
You would think, but that's not been my experience.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I had a lot of people come to me, in the early days and say, Gordon, you got another Redemption Draweth
Yeah.
Nigh?
Oh,
no, but I've got other songs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think most great songwriters like you, Dave Clark, Dottie, they're their best advocates for their songs. I've always seen that.
Yeah.
But you had, again, if I remember right, you had a season at Brentwood Benson, then you had a season at Word, and then you had a season on your own.
Yeah.
So you really don't have all of your pieces in one pile anywhere where you had an advocate from a corporate standpoint. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
Any regrets?
I wouldn't know what to regret.
It's a great answer.
Well, anyway, I went to an Assembly of God church in Detroit. It was a large church. In that day and time, 1,200 was huge.
Yeah, great size. Yeah.
That was before the mega church.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Many thousands. But anyway, Jimmy Swaggart really was breaking in the late 60s.
Yeah.
They brought him in for a brief series of meetings starting on a New Year's Eve in the late 60s, maybe 66 or 7, and he stayed 4 weeks. He came back 2 years later and stayed 9 weeks, every night but Monday and Saturday, and jammed the place. And it got to the place where it was jammed 2 hours before the thing started.
Yeah.
So when that happens, you might as well just go ahead and start then, because you can't get anybody else in anyhow. So that's what they did. But I tried to pitch him some songs, and that's not easy to do.
No.
Have you ever tried to pitch songs to Jimmy Swaggart?
Just once.
Okay. Well, anyhow.
It's a funny story that I'll wait for another episode, but yeah.
Okay. But he had this guy that was his right-hand man named Harry Bouton, and he said, come on over here to the church. We'll be working on some things, and Harry will set up the tape recorder, and you put down some of your songs for me. So that's what I did, and just using the church piano.
Yeah.
And but I got a cut out of him, Jesus Will Outshine Them.
Yeah.
He titled an album.
Yeah, sure
Wow,
was.
that was one of his biggest records.
Yeah, well, he titled that album Jesus Will
Great.
Outshine
I
Them.
forgot about that.
Yeah, and he thought that the greatest singer in Christian music was, and you know him, and I know him, and let me see if I can remember his name. Mills, Walt
Mills. Oh.
Walt.
There you
Mills.
go. He was on PTL a lot.
Okay, and Walt was a
He
really
was a
good
great singer.
singer.
He had a
Tremendous singer.
Dayspring record that I
Yeah,
loved.
that's
Yeah.
right.
He's a
Years ago.
terrific
Yeah,
singer.
He was. Yeah.
Anyway, Walt cut a song of mine called "Come Into the Ark."
I remember that, yeah.
And Swaggart recorded "Come Into the Ark" because Walt recorded it. And
Did Jimmy record He's as Close as the mention of his name, or am I just, he may not.
I think his people have done
Okay,
it
maybe that's why I've seen it on TV.
in more recent
Yeah,
times.
yeah.
But
I love watching his show because of those songs. I
yeah,
love
Jimmy had. I had a song that I couldn't interest anybody in called "Congratulations Are in Order," and
Was that on the Glove record?
I don't know if it's on there or not. I have to look.
You cut it. It's on one of your.
Okay. Well, anyhow, Jimmy started using that song at the end of his altar calls.
I love the title. Now, I haven't heard it, but I want to hear it.
Yeah. Anyway, that.
Congratulations are in order.
Yeah.
Did you become friends with Jimmy?
To some extent, I would think I could go out there and sit down with him, more with Donnie than Jimmy.
Yeah.
But, and the real powerhouse in the wings is the grandson, Gabriel.
Gabriel, he's just a
He's
power-
got the stuff.
He does.
And,
yeah. Have you been to his church?
Not in a long time.
We went 2 years ago. Dottie Leonard, who owns the company, and myself and a few other, Tana Lonan, and I'm telling you, I was blown away by it. But that Gabriel is powerful.
Yeah, he is. He
But
really
it was
is.
so cool. He walked into the church 45 minutes before, and Jimmy's sitting there at the piano, and
Playing with the
and that's,
musicians.
yes, and that's all. And the place is already packed, but people are there. I mean, it blows your mind.
Wow.
And then he'll go and sit down, and Donnie does a little few
Yeah.
things, and those singers. He always has some of the greatest singers.
They've
And,
cut a lot of
Yeah.
on that at that
Yeah,
church down
yeah.
there. A lot of they've done all the Karen Peck singles.
Oh, yeah,
They do
yeah.
a lot
Oh,
of
yeah.
Joseph stuff.
He's got an Irish tenor
Is
on his
it,
team.
I know the guy.
White-haired guy.
Yes, I know who it is. Anyway, yeah,
He would have white hair too if he
if I
hair.
had hair.
You could wear a
I
white
could wear a white wig.
I bet you could get a deal on one of Roger McDuff's old units.
Okay, that's funny.
So let me ask you a couple more questions here. This is fascinating to us. I hope you're enjoying it as much
I
as we
am.
are.
I'm having-
So
We may have to do another one to get it.
I
out.
would no. I love this.
I'm all about that too.
Yeah.
We talked about you had songs in different places and then you kind of, I don't know what that looked like or the reason why, but you kind of went off the grid as far as the industry was like. So now when administration has changed, everything, all the digital streaming, and did you keep up with that part of the business to where you're still? Do you have people that you trust that manage that for you?
Not really.
Oh, Gordon.
Not really.
Okay, good.
No, I mean, just you reach a point where you just kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And admin used to be.
I'm kind of numb with all this stuff.
Yeah.
So your catalogs, are they still in? And I'm asking stuff. None of my business, but I'm curious. Are they still with those different companies?
Well, but they've been sold and resold
Yeah.
resold, and Warner Chappell picked up something.
Yeah. Like your masters with Word, do you have?
I own those.
That's great.
I bought them all up.
That's
when
great.
I saw the handwriting on the wall.
Great.
I love it.
Great.
And,
So when you look at statements, you say, "Boy, I can't believe this one is still being used." Are there titles like that surprise you? That you, beyond forget Redemption Draweth Nigh, but other songs that you go, "Man, what a blessing that's still out there working."
Yeah.
Are there certain titles that come to mind?
yeah. Well, the song "The Glove," you mentioned that.
Yeah.
And somebody called me recently about that song. Said that my wife thinks it's the best gospel song she ever heard.
Wow, I love that.
But you get those kinds of reactions.
Do you still go out and travel?
I do. I do.
love that.
I've had 3 years of health issues.
Yeah.
3.5 years ago, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer, but it
I'm
was between stage 2 and 3.
Okay.
But I was telling you, I had the prostate cancer,
Right.
and immediately after that, COVID.
Yeah.
I spent 30 days between the hospital and the rehab facility with COVID.
Really?
Well, we know people
Yeah.
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 who passed.
I know. I know.
Aaron Wilbur,
Oh yeah.
Big John Hall.
Yep. Tons
There
of
were a lot of people that
Yep.
went out with
I
that.
know.
And then I get done with that. I come to the house, and my daughter Holly, she's a researcher. She says, "Dad, you have NPH." I said, "What? You have NPH, normal pressure hydrocephalus." And there are hydrocephalus is water on the brain pressure, and there's 600,000 or 700,000 cases in the United States, from little kids to very old seniors, and. What happened was I got all these symptoms. They started piling on pretty fast. And I was using a walker, taking 4-inch steps.
No.
It got to that point. So I went to a neurologist, had all kinds of scans and MRIs and what have you. And he called me and said, "Mr. Jensen, you have NPH." I said, "I already know that, doctor. My daughter told me." And she's not a doctor.
Wow.
But it required brain surgery.
Wow.
And I had it, it'll be 2 years ago in October.
I had no idea.
Yeah, they drilled a hole in my head and installed, it took 2 different surgeons, a neurosurgeon and a gastroman. And they put this drain in my head and ran tubes down into my abdomen. And but hey, within weeks of that surgery, 80% of those symptoms were gone. That's how fast it shifted back, and I was amazed at that. But I had to recover for 2-3 months.
Wow.
But there are things I'll never do again. I'll never use the term "I need that" like I need a hole in the head. I will never use that term again.
That's true.
So when you're out, are you still playing and singing? Are you speaking mainly, or are you?
I'm doing all the above.
That's great.
Whatever the occasion calls for. And I use tracks.
Yeah.
And I use a piano some.
Yeah. Good.
And I do speak if they want that.
Wow.
So
Well,
as you, I gotta ask one more. As you, I hate using the term age, but as you've gotten older and more mature,
That's what I heard.
do you look back at some of these songs, and is there any certain song that you think, that ministers to me, that you wrote?
Well, they all meant something at the time.
Yeah. Is there anything special now about certain titles that you go back and you think, oh,
Well, I've got certain songs that well, Tears Are a Language.
one of the best songs ever. One of the
That
best,
I get requests for that
Yeah.
all the
I'll
time.
bet.
I see that quoted so many times
Yeah.
on different social media platforms
Mhm.
when people are answering.
You're getting paid on all those, right?
Yeah.
Well,
You don't know.
no, they used to tell me you got to trust the system.
Yeah.
But how do we trust and verify?
Yeah.
That's the question.
Yeah, I do see that so many times. People, they'll say, well, tears are a language. You'll
Yeah.
hear it, you see it posted a lot. And everything.
And
You wrote a lot of bumper sticker worthy songs.
Yeah.
I go out now, and there were two sisters from New Hampshire that used to promote gospel music. They managed hotels, did all kinds of bus tours. Their name is Philbrick, Linda and Martha. Well, Linda passed on a couple years ago, but I'm recovering from this surgery, and I'm saying, well, Lord, how in the world am I going to get back on the road? How's it going to happen? What's got to happen? My phone rings. It's Martha Philbrick. She says, Gordon, I want to book you all over New England and down the coast and in Florida. And I said, great, go for it. And she has booked me probably 30, 40 dates, good dates, in the last year.
Wow.
So anyway,
That's
that was a godsend.
I love that.
So last night, one of the things that Jimmy Webb said that just wasted me, he said about one of his attributes of a great song is that you write it and you got a room full of, I forget the exact wording, but you got all these different people from different places going through different things, listening to it. And at the exact moment, the same thing in that song touches everybody in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I left there and I just thought, we've had a rough week with lost another friend, and I just needed to hear some writer stories last night. And because this industry a lot of times will tell you, hey, you know what, you had a good season, walk away and hold your head up high.
Yeah.
And yet, when you feel like what you do is a call from the Lord,
You're not going to hang it up.
you can't hang it up.
You can't really.
No.
So what's that song that you feel when you're out to those crowds that you know exactly what he described last night, that you go, I know when I say this line, everybody's going to feel it.
Well, Tears Are a Language, God understands
it's a great
it.
song.
And I've got a song called Whisper Jesus.
Okay.
Yes, you do.
One of my favorite, and I kept wanting to ask him, did he write that? And I sing that.
John Starnes
it's
had
one of the-
a good
Whisper
cut
Jesus. I
on
love
that.
it. Oh, it's one of the best. It's just such a worship
Yeah.
where it's the truth.
And I've got another one, He's as Close as the mention of his name.
It's
Yeah,
such
I do that thing.
Not
a lot.
very, but those are all songs that
Yeah. Those
they
little,
they still hold up as
They do.
well as. So I'd love it, and we're about done, but this has been incredible.
Yes.
I'd love to hear the story behind, is if there's one close as a mention.
Well, I've got 4 kids, 2 daughters and 2 sons, and they're all between 45 and 50 years old now. They're still my kids.
yeah.
But when my oldest son was born, he was born a little early, and he didn't start breathing right, and it's a hospital. I'm not even sure it's still around. It was in Madison at the time, but anyhow, the nurse came in and said, "Mr. Jensen, you have a son," and I said to my wife, I said, I'm going to go down and see him. So I went down to the nursery, and I couldn't see him in there. I didn't see his name on any of those baskets, you know. It was a pretty big nursery. And so I knocked on the door, and I said, I can't find my boy. Where is he? She said, oh, you must be Mr. Jensen. Hold on, the doctor wants to talk to you. Well, don't you hate it when that happens?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And the doctor emerged a couple minutes later. He said, no. He said, there's a problem. We call it the hyaline membrane syndrome, where his lungs were not properly developed. And He said, follow me and you can see him. So I went back there with him, and this baby is fighting for every erratic, irregular breath. And he said, no, look, this hospital's not equipped. He needs to go to Vanderbilt. And he said, we'll do that in a couple hours by ambulance. I said, well, doctor, my wife doesn't know there's anything wrong. I can't go back there without you. I need you to explain to her what's going on.
Yeah.
So he walked in the room, and of course she started bawling immediately.
Yeah.
Knew something was wrong.
Yeah.
And explained the thing. He said, now look, when the ambulance comes to take him to Vanderbilt, I'll let you know. Well, we had a prayer meeting, because that's all you can do. And that's the best thing you can do.
Yeah.
So a lot of people think, well, it's your last resort. Like, is there anything better we can do? No, there isn't really.
No.
And so we prayed, and I would say it was a half hour, no more. That doctor comes back to me and says, I have wonderful news for you. I was standing observing your son just a little while ago, and he started breathing perfectly normal. I've been watching him, and you know what? He's not going to Vanderbilt. You can go down and see him in a few minutes. He's going to be just fine.
Yeah.
And that's where that song came from. He's as close as a mention of his name. I would tell that story.
And he is.
I would tell that story, and I would hear myself say, we learned in that situation that he's as close as the mention of his name. And then one day I heard myself say that.
You thought.
And I thought, I need to sing that.
That's right.
And it needs to be sung.
Wow.
Dusty.
Woo. This is why we love to tell the
And
stories.
that boy is a registered nurse today.
We're glad you were here for this episode of I Love to Tell the Story. Be sure and tune in next time for more with Dusty Wells and Dave Clark. It'll just keep getting better and better. Wait and see. See you next time.